If you're anything like me, the quote I'm about to read you is going to rub you the wrong way, so just be forewarned. You'll achieve much more by being consistently reliable than by being occasionally extraordinary. Sounds like a reasonable quote, right? The problem is, what if being occasionally extraordinary is the only trick you've got up your sleeve, and this consistently reliable piece is not really in your wheelhouse? That is what I'm going to cover in today's video, because if you have ADHD, then you know what I mean by being occasionally extraordinary some of the times and being nothing like consistently reliable any of the time. And that is a huge problem for us because the world wants us to be consistently reliable, but we weren't built for that. Like, think back on the savannah when there was hunters and gatherers. We were the hunters. We were occasionally extraordinary in our efforts to go hunt down prey, kill it and bring it back for dinner, and then go rest for the rest of the time. And apologies to my vegetarians here. That's just how I see us being from an energetic standpoint. We can rally, we can do the thing, but then we need a long rest period, and that is completely out of our control. So there's no being able to predict when our next extraordinary moment is going to happen. And not only is this a huge frustration for ADHDers themselves, it's a frustration for everyone in their lives. Because when we have those moments of extraordinary brilliance, not only are we aware of our potential, but everyone else is then aware of our potential, and that becomes the benchmark for our success. But the problem is that you can't be reliably consistent at this benchmark level up here, which is really just extraordinary moments that just happen occasionally. So what do we do about this occasional brilliance when everybody assumes that that's just our normal, and if we're not living up to that benchmark, then we're not trying hard enough, or we just need to focus more, which is the most frustrating thing I have ever heard. Well, in my mind, the first line of defense is awareness and education, which is what you're getting right now. If you have this example in your back pocket that, look, sometimes you are going to be occasionally extraordinary, and in those moments, you want to feel appreciated for the work that you do, but that is just not going to be something that you can live up to every single day, because most people can't. And when we hit those moments of extraordinary brilliance, they're usually very, very extraordinary and brilliant. So first of all, setting this expectation that people might see the occasional extraordinary behavior from you, but not to expect it all the time, is job number one. Because like it or not, we were never built to be consistently mediocre, and who would want that anyways? But I also don't want us to throw in the towel on this idea of being consistent at things. Because I know, looking at my past, that there was a slew of instances where I should have been consistent and I needed to be consistent in order to achieve what I wanted to do, and I just couldn't do it. But now, the Karen of today, and hopefully the Karen of the future, has figured out how to be selectively consistent on the things that matter most. Everything else gets my best effort on a daily basis, and sometimes I have those moments of occasional excellence and brilliance, and when I have those moments, I try to squeeze as much juice out of them as I possibly can, and for the rest of the time, you get what you get, and I rely on systems to keep me moving forward. So let me break down what that means in a very tangible example. In terms of my life in this season, if you will, what matters most is my health and well-being, building my business and being consistent, because I want to live by example and show you what's possible. So it's really important to me to be as consistent as possible, and also give myself a lot more space and grace to grow and build on my entrepreneurial skills and my coaching skills, and just continue to learn and serve as much as I can. Those are the two most important things in my life. And when I say health and well-being, that includes the relationships in my life that feed my soul and make me feel good. Another piece of that is where I live. So for example, right now I'm in a short-term rental in California, hence the china cabinet behind me. That is not my own. For me, it's more important to be here around my friends and the weather, and I'm looking out of the ocean right now. That just fills my soul, and it is so important to me. The things that are not important to me are wearing fancy labels, having a fancy car, doing a lot of things that other folks do because they enjoy it, but knowing very well that those are things that are not important to me. So I have gotten very good at understanding and getting clear on what matters in my life, but then also knowing very clearly of those things that matter in my life, what requires consistency and what doesn't. So in my business, showing up here weekly and sharing content is an absolute must. I have a live coaching group that I'm doing right now. Showing up for them on our scheduled coaching calls, an absolute must. Working out every day so that I am sharp and focused, absolute must. And there's a few other non-negotiables in there as well, which I won't bore you with, but I know the things in my life that I need to be absolutely consistent with on a daily basis. And I prioritize my consistent efforts in those areas. And because I've done that for so long, they become habitual. So the cognitive energy and the cognitive load of trying to be consistent with them has long since passed. Now I just do it because it's part of my routine. It's almost like a robotic piece of me. And with every new habit and behavior that shifts from being kind of awkward and hard and really requiring my effort to be consistent to moving into this sort of automatic mode, I then have more space to open up to something else, which I can then focus on being consistent with. So what I'm saying here is I don't try to be consistent with everything all at once, because that is a recipe for failure. I know exactly what's important to me. And of those things, I know which things require consistency and which ones don't. And from there, I'm able to build out habits where not everything feels so damn taxing, because consistency is not natural for me and it's probably not natural for you either. So when you think about the quote that I just shared with you and you see it as being reasonable, that people should be reliably consistent, not, occasionally extraordinary, but you are actually built for the occasional extraordinary piece, rather than looking at the quote that I just shared with you and thinking, well, I'm screwed because I'm not wired that way. Or spending your whole life being a square peg and trying to drive yourself into round holes. I think this idea of finding selective consistency is the way that we build bridges between what the world expects of us and what is possible for who we are. And rather than trying to build janky bridges in every direction to live up to a certain standard on a quote or based on the expectations of the people in your life, rather than doing that, look for the areas in your life where it's worth it to spend the time building a Golden Gate style and quality bridge between where you are and the outcome that you want. And when you do that, not only are you able to get where you want to go so much faster, because the destination has a lot of meaning and interest for you, you get there with a greater sense of confidence and self-trust. And self-trust is something that I find most adults with ADHD really struggle with. So if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of self-trust, do you want to be trying to get to destinations with a janky bridge? Or do you want something that's solid and has a great foundation that you'll be able to get back and forth from for years to come? Obviously, you want the solid foundation bridge. So now let me take this out of a metaphor and explain how it's actually shown up in my life. I've shared before that I've had 5-ish previous businesses. Some of them I can't even really count as a business. They all failed. And they all failed because, number one, I didn't have enough self-trust. And number two, because I didn't have that self-trust and I didn't think I could actually be successful, I didn't show up consistently. Now, I can't tell you exactly why this business is so different than the previous ones in terms of my consistency. I think some of it is probably experience, but the other piece of it that I've shared in the past is that I'm very emotionally connected to this business. It means a lot to me. It's high up there on my values, and it's a reflection of my strengths and what's most important to me. So because it is worth building that consistency muscle, I've been able to create that really strong foundation. And what that looks like are the systems in my business that make it look like I'm very consistent, because I show up here every Friday with a new podcast and video and articles and all of these things. But in the back end, I'm doing things kind of in fits and starts. So I'll do a whole bunch of recording, a whole bunch of planning, a whole bunch of editing in various different stages, so that there's always something in the hopper, so that I don't feel that pressure to show up even when my energy is low or I don't feel like recording anything. And then I end up delivering something that's subpar and I'm not really proud of. So that is what I mean by finding the destinations that are so important to you that it's worth the effort to figure out how you can show up consistently, or at least create systems that makes it look like you're showing up consistently. And for you, it may not be a business. For you, it might be showing up consistently for your friends or your ailing parents who need your help, or your job, or your workouts. Whatever it is for you that is the most important thing, it's worth it to invest the time to create systems to build that bridge, rather than just trying to shove yourself into square holes when you are a round peg and never quite fitting right and always feeling like you could just pop loose at any time. That's a crappy way to live. And I can share that from experience because I've done that for so many years. So I hope that analogy lands for you. And what I want to leave you with is this idea of thinking about what's most important in your life. And then of that, what are the things that do require you to show up being consistent and reliable, rather than the other areas of your life where you can show up and be occasionally brilliant. And the perfect example of occasionally being extraordinary in my own life is my social life. I can occasionally show up and be absolutely on it, but then an hour later, my social battery is drained and I want to wrap myself in the blanket and sit on the couch for the rest of the day. So knowing what those are for you and being able to manage them is so much more important and valuable than trying to be consistent at a bunch of things that really don't mean that much to you. So I hope you got something out of this. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.